All right, thanks for having me. I haven't been back to Bismarck since 1998 was the last time I was here, and I gotta give you guys a lot of credit. It's pretty much how I remember it. I know you probably think it changed a lot, but I was grateful that I could find my way around still. I don't live in the city of Denver. I don't know who does. There's a lot of them, but I don't know who they are. I live south and west of Denver, kind of up in the mountains. Charlie and I were just talking about it, and I live in the wildland-urban interface. Now, my house is properly mitigated, trust me, because my wife said the state emergency management director cannot lose his house to a fire because his dumb butt didn't mitigate. So she had me out there cut and slash, and had to change my whole fence, and everything that I did is what we hope people do. But here's the thing. I didn't come to talk about that today. We all get very comfortable talking about those kind of hazards. I think here you probably talk a lot about floods, and how do you prepare for, mitigate against, respond to, and recover from a flood. We talk about flash floods in Colorado a lot, and we talk about wildfires a lot. Until recently, we rarely talked about preparing for, responding to, and recovering from a cyber attack. And I think we probably should have. If I ask around the room, if I say, hey, raise your hand if you think you have a role in information security or cybersecurity. If you're an emergency manager, do you think you have a role in that? Yeah, absolutely you do. And it took us a little while in Colorado to get our head around this because we sort of, as an emergency management community, we kind of looked around and said, well, A, that stuff's weird. B, don't we have a CISO, and isn't it their problem? A Chief Information Security Officer? It must be their problem, right? And we just kind of said, well, that's sort of a cyber thingy, It's not really an emergency management problem. It's a cyber thingy, and guys with weird tattoos and hoodies that hang out in dark rooms are going to go handle that, right? And so now I go around, having learned my lesson, I go around and try to share that lesson with as many people as I can find that'll listen to me. So I'm very grateful that North Dakota Emergency Management decided to listen to me at least for a little while before you all go home. So I appreciate you letting me come here. It says on the slide there, Debbie Blythe. She is our Chief Information Security Officer, and she is my most valuable partner in the cybersecurity, emergency management, and emergency response world. She often does come with me, and we often co-present. So I apologize that you don't have the better half of this presentation. She's actually quite a bit brighter than I am. But I'll try my best. So let's spend a few minutes together talking about what happened and what are our key takeaways from the 2018 ransomware attack on the Colorado Department of Transportation. Began in February of 2018, and it lasted about the longest 6 weeks of my life. We always laugh, you say, oh yeah, I'll stand at my EOC, I'll put a cot there, and we'll wait till the fire goes out. Well, I had no idea how much of my life I would lose to a ransomware attack. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, maybe. There we go. How did it happen? We'll walk through that. Debbie and I do this. We alternate audiences quite a lot. I go with her when she speaks to the highly technical people, and she takes you through how it happened in excruciating detail. It's really pretty phenomenal, the sophistication of the attack and the mistakes that we made. And then we often come to emergency management audiences, and I'll get as technical as you ask me to be. I actually can't do that now. But I'll stay as high level as is useful, because it turns out that in a lot of ways, and I was talking to some folks in the lobby, you kind of got, I think emergency managers have to become a little bit hazard agnostic. In other words, it doesn't really matter how it happened, only that it did happen, and now we got to do something. And I tell my elected officials this all the time. They say, what hazard keeps you up at night? And I said, the next one. I mean, what do I care? Whatever's next is the one keeping me up. So we can talk about that, and I'll answer questions to the level of detail you'd like, but we can stay high level if you prefer that. What it did, we'll walk through the impacts, right? Consequence management, that's an emergency management term. We use impacts because that's a cybersecurity term. But I'm telling you, what it did, I'll talk to you in the context of consequence management, because that's something we're really familiar with. The timeline, which just tells you how much of my life I lost to this incident. How we responded. This is an important part, and I'll spend more time in the how we responded, because this is where I think emergency managers really have to get their head around the technical threats that our communities face. And there's a lot of different responses, and we're really good at this. And I'm gonna share with you some lessons we learned about the response and the role of the emergency manager in that response. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. I'll show you the cyber players. You'll note that only a small percentage of the cyber players turn out to be super technical folks. And a lot of the cyber players turn out to be emergency managers, or in our case, HR, human resource people. How about procurement and contracting? Did you know they were a cyber player? You bet they are. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about what we do differently. We made mistakes, and I want to share those mistakes, because I don't want others to make those mistakes. And then the key takeaways, some things we thought we did right that we would ask that if you ever face this, that you look at replicating that. So with that, let's go through how it happened. This cool little diagram, we'll walk through that. Our Department of Transportation brought a virtual server on to test a new business process. That happens all the time, everywhere. Not just in departments of transportation. It happens in the private industry. It happens in all the departments. It's happening today in North Dakota somewhere. Probably a lot. It's normal. There's nothing wrong with that, right? All right. That virtual server was connected to the CDOT network. You see it down, has this thing got a pointer on it? Right here? Okay. Nothing wrong with that, right? That happens a lot, every day, all over the place. You got to connect it to your network to see how it's going to respond and interact with it, right? Nothing wrong with that. It also was connected to the internet through a cloud service provider. Nothing wrong with that, right? And it's a test system, so we don't really have to load all our super high-speed standard security controls that OIT told us, our Office of Information Technology told us we have to, because it's just a test system, right? Nothing wrong with that. Uh-oh. And it was established as a domain administrator account. A domain administrator account has the ability to do pretty much anything to pretty much anybody that's connected to the network. And that looks a little more like that. Whoops, let's go back. That was the day that server was brought on, and the day it touched the internet, it came under attack. 40,000 brute force passwords attempts were made. 40,000. How long do you think it took them to get to password 1? That wasn't the password. It wasn't that bad. But consider that, right? I mean, it's doing 40,000 password attempts, and within 48 hours, it had the password, which I still don't know, because I'm hazard agnostic. I don't care what the password was, only that someone found it. But contemplate that. Now, that's not a human doing that, is it? That is a bot. That is a bot that is scanning the network every day, 1 million times a day, looking for what we did, looking for that little hole. And it went after it, and within 48 hours, it had seized up our Department of Transportation. about 2 a.m., and I don't know which CDOT person was working at 2 a.m., but they logged onto their computer and they got the nice little message that says, "You're screwed, you owe us a lot of money, or you don't get your stuff back." For about the next 4 hours, our help desk, Debbie Blythe's help desk, was blowing up. They have 2,800 employees working at CDOT. 2,700 of them called the help desk. And then that was our indicator, right? We have a problem. Our our CISO declared a level 1 information technology crisis, which caused my phone to ring. But we didn't really do so well. But look at this. This is what happened. 39% of the laptops, 81% of the desktops, 339 servers. I had no idea they had 339 servers. They had 340, but one of them survived. Do you know how many servers are in your agencies? Probably not, right? That's actually hard to know. One. Yeah, a lot of our counties, it's one. And when that happens, when that one has a problem, it's challenging. All the VoIP phones, that turned out to be more important than we thought. So there are some things to consider, right? If you lost your payroll application, and it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, most organizations now use some software to pay their employees, right? Explain that to your employees. Well, looks like pay is not coming this month because we lost the server that had the application on it. Internal and external stakeholders, how do you communicate? Vote phones went down, email went down. What's plan B? Oh, wait, what's plan C? How do you communicate to your employees? Again, big or small, there has to be a way, and CDOT really struggled with this. And what do you tell your external contractors that you're about to disconnect them? And believe it or not, big and small, you probably have a handful or a whole lot of external contractors. And you're about to tell them, hey, I'm taking you off the network. I'm unplugging you. And they're going to say, why? So, well, because I have a ransomware attack. Well, what's their next thought? Crap, you probably gave it to me. It's like the measles. And then what do you tell them when you say, okay, we're clean, we're going to plug you back in? We got a lot of, oh, hell no, you're not going to. You better certify, validate, confirm, because we don't want your ransomware. And so those are just some things that you kind of have to think through. I talked about how we got here. I talked about the 48-hour period, and you can kind of see that right about here, that Sam, it turned out to be Sam. There's a bunch. This is not a threat brief, and it doesn't need to be, right? I'm also ransomware agnostic. I don't care which one I got. I just know I got one. It attacked initially our cyber incident response team out of our Office of Information Technology, so the nerds. And they're really super great nerds, too. I love them all now. Responded, and they went to work on this thing, and they worked all weekend trying to contain that thing and then eradicate it. And by February 28th, they thought, yep, we about got it. We have containment in place. We're going to take a breather, and we're going to go home and get some rest, and we're going to tell CDOT to go back to work. That wasn't the case. That's because February is a weird month. The next day, this thing reset itself. We do not believe now that it was a new attack. We think we didn't quite have it. We didn't quite get it. And it just replicated itself and started over. Let me tell you what, that is deflating. Anybody, a fireman, firefighter, you think you got the fire out, you go home, wind picks up, and woof, you got yourself another fire. That's kind of how it feels. It kind of makes you, well, I've never been a firefighter, but I've never been a cybersecurity guy either. All I know is that sucked. And the thing is, it came back with a vengeance. And our team was already tired. And so the next day, we asked our National Guard for help. And here in North Dakota, you have elements of a cyber protection team in your National Guard. And that's important. We'll talk a little bit about some other things we did with the National Guard. But they came on site. They were fresh. They were rested. And they sat down next to our cyber incident response team from OIT, and they gave them a breather. Some of them got home, got to have a shower. I mean, just like any other emergency responder, that stuff matters. And so they caught their breath a little bit. On the 5th, and we'll talk about this as we go along, we established a unified command group under the State Emergency Operations Center. The governor declared a disaster. First time a state governor has declared a state disaster for a cyber attack. Obviously, it subsequently happened in Texas about 2 weeks ago. And 10 days ago, they declared a state disaster. That brought our State Emergency Operations Center to bear, and we stood up a unified command group. By the 6th, we had containment declared, and we began restoration of services. By the 9th, we started to demob. Just like any other incident, you begin this process of demobilization. And then we began this kind of, what we thought was going to be a really long and painful recovery. But for reasons we'll discuss here in a little bit, we came about it pretty quickly. So that says 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is just 4 weeks, but I can tell you I lost 5 weeks of my life to this thing. All right, so how did we respond? Just like every other incident, there are multiple responses that occur to the incident. And there are multiple stakeholders, and they all have slightly different priorities. And that was important. We kind of came to that realization too slowly. And so I ask you to think about that. Just like any other incident, there's more than one set of priorities. There's more than one stakeholder interest here. And so the business, in this case, our Department of Transportation, all they cared about was, we got to keep the roads open, and we got to operate. We got to figure out how to operate. We got to figure out how to work with our employees, and our customers. And our recovery priorities are this: operate the financial systems, protect the traffic control systems, and get back to business. Well, the cyber incident response had a different set of priorities. Hey, I don't give a crap if you can operate or not. We have to secure the entire state network. The Colorado State Network is vulnerable. It hasn't gotten out of CDOT, and no matter what, we're not letting it out of CDOT. And we don't care if we have to take you off the planet to do that. Well, the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation didn't see it that way. But the chief information security officer absolutely saw it that way. They're both right, as often is the case. We've got to secure the network, and we're going to eradicate the malware. We're going to secure CDOT, and then, and only then, will we begin to rebuild the CDOT networks. So here at the bottom is his number one, hey, I gotta get back to business, and you're telling me you're going to do that last? Yep. Well, what does emergency response do? What are emergency managers really good at? What are emergency managers really good at? Refereeing. Right? We're used to that. I don't know about you, but every time we have a fire, I have to referee between a county sheriff and a fire district battalion chief. Every time. My county emergency managers, they all have white and black striped shirts. Because they go in and they say, hey, sheriff, yeah, I got it. I got your priorities. Hey, fire chief, I got your priorities. I'm going to figure out a way to unify those. And so that's why I say emergency managers got to be in the game in cybersecurity, because this is something we're really good at. No one else does it better than we do. So we need to go do it. We need to take that and do what we do. Understand the problem set, understand the stakeholder interests, develop common priorities, right? Emergency managers, we know that. They teach that in ICS 100, 200, 300, pick 100. All the hundreds. Create unity of effort, right? We do that. And referee, we do that. I did that a lot. But we're really good at it. So don't be afraid to take your emergency management skill sets. Don't look at it and say, well, that's a cyber thingy, man. I don't know what to do. Yeah, you know exactly what to do. That. Same thing you do in every other incident. You don't have to have a certificate from a renowned cybersecurity institute to do your JOB. It's not a cyber thingy. It's an incident. You know what to do. So get in the game, do your thing. There you go. Whoops, I went too fast again. I'm all over this. Recognize that? Of course you do. It's an ICS form. We all have it automated, man. We do it on our phones now. Unless there's a cybersecurity attack, and then you do it on paper. So keep a couple of copies on a clipboard. I'll show you some pictures of how the response to a highly sophisticated technical world happens on butcher paper. I got pictures of it. There it is, right there, ICS 202. It's what we do, so don't be afraid of cyber. It's just an incident. Do your thing. All right, so I drew this up. I said, this is what it's going to look like. This is what we're going to do. I said, all right, we're going to establish a unified coordination group. It's going to coordinate with the governor's office. CDOT has an incident command post. They're following ICS like nobody's business, man. They are killing it. So they got an ICP. The Chief Information Security Officer has deployed her cybersecurity incident response team, so I'm going to coordinate with that. They'd never heard of ICS, and NIMS isn't a thing. So I figure, well, there's going to be some communication gap here, but I'll work through that. And then, just like any strike force, that strike force resource is going to control their teams, a malware team, a network team, and an endpoint team. It's going to have some stuff in it, OIT, vendors. Most cybersecurity response will involve the private sector, and I'll talk a little bit about how you have to integrate those guys into your response team. And they're a little weird, and sometimes you have to referee with them, as you'll see on the next slide. The National Guard sent a team, and so I thought, well, those are my resources. That's what it's going to look like. Drew it up, put it in an incident action plan, and went to work. Afterwards, in the AAR, I redrew it. Looked a little more like this. Is that unusual? If you're an emergency manager, is that unusual? Everyone thought that was weird except the emergency management folks that I took at my EOC was like, oh yeah, that happens every time. Because it does, right? And so that's another thing that emergency managers bring as a strength. That doesn't freak us out. Because it happens every time. We're okay with that, and we can make other people be okay with that. Your Chief Security Information Officer may not be okay with that. You might have to talk her off the ledge a time or two. But we're used to that, aren't we? We do that in every incident. So, the ICP stepped on the executive director, was talking to the governor's office, but the executive director was talking to the governor's office. The Unified Coordination Group was talking to every damn buddy. This kind of worked, but then we got help. Now first, let me tell you, there was some neat stuff that happened there. One, we did not have, and we were never going to have, and our governor wasn't going to ask for a Stafford Act declaration, period. And yet, we figured out a way to get a hunt and identification response team from the Department of Homeland Security and didn't pay for it. Right? So we all laughed when I pointed over there, but let me tell you what, those guys had skills. They flew in from DC, because the government's here to help. And these guys had some serious skills. And what they did is they helped us establish our cyber perimeter. Number one, like most incidents, you have to contain it. Where's my firefighter? Right? You set a perimeter. Don't let the fire go here. The CISO's number one priority was defend the Colorado State network, keep it in CDOT. And those guys, that HERT team from there, they went to every other the 18 other state agencies and validated that it hadn't gotten loose. That was worth $10 million to me. Didn't cost me a dime. So we laugh, but don't be afraid to ask. And in fact, in Texas, they deployed a similar team. There's no Stafford Act declaration in Texas. So get to know who's here from the state. Is Cody, I didn't see Cody, but there may be some folks from Cody's shop. Yeah, great. Get to know your federal partner in cybersecurity, your CISA partner. It's probably Harley Reinerson up here because he's the Region 8 guy. Establish a relationship. I went to Harley Reinerson, whom I've known for 25 years, long enough to tell really awful stories about each other. Literally, over a beer, said Harley, the governor said, well, I'm standing up a unified command group tomorrow morning, and I think I'm screwed. I said, I'm probably going to need some help, and I'm not going to have a good way to ask for it. He laughed at me. He said, yeah, you're screwed. I'll see what I can do. So have a relationship with your federal cybersecurity partners. They want to help, and they got really creative for us, and I suspect we're going to learn down the road that they got really creative in Texas because that team stayed on the ground for probably 10 days with no declaration and no funding source. We never reimbursed them. They never asked. FEMA, kind of buried over here, sent a communications team, the MERS. They sent the MERS. Here's what you shouldn't do. You should not establish your unified coordination or unified command group in the building you just disconnected from the planet. You shouldn't do that. You should at least establish it next door. Someplace you haven't disconnected from the whole planet. So I needed some help with communications. Because everyone was using their cell phone, right, VoIP's gone. Everyone's using their cell phone. We crushed the tower in about 90 minutes. And we brought in a cow, and then FEMA brought in their MERS and got us into a place where we could communicate a little better. It was a mistake, and FEMA bailed us out. Didn't charge us a thing. No Stafford declaration. Partnerships matter. We talk about that a lot in emergency management, right? They don't talk about it a lot in cybersecurity like we do. They would have never thought to call DHS. They would have never thought to call FEMA. And they're not supposed to. They're not. We are. It's what we do. It's not what they do. They're supposed to contain, eradicate, and rebuild stuff that I can't even pronounce. Domain controller. Pfft, that's my wife. All right. Thought I'd show you some pictures. Because we all have this perception. Emergency managers, I think, have this perception of a bunch of skinny, nerdy people with purple hair and hoodies hanging out in their grandparents' basement doing cyber stuff. That is not what it looks like. This was our Unified Command Group Operations Center. No hoodies, lots of lights, no dark spaces. This is after we eradicated all the monsters. Note water now. That cybersecurity guys will not hydrate. Who knew? And we'll talk a little bit about that. But doesn't that look like pretty much an incident? Does that look like your emergency operations center? Yeah, because it's not a cyber thingy. It's an incident. That's an incident emergency operations center, not a cyber thingy. There was a guy with purple hair, but he showed up later. And by the way, this is the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation articulating his priorities. And these guys are like, what? What does that look like? That looks like the morning brief, right? Because we established an operational rhythm and we did normal emergency management stuff. And both communities appreciated that. Let me tell you, the cyber incident response team, when we put some structure around it and we said we're going to set priorities, we're going to put the priorities on the wall, we're going to tape them, they really appreciated that. They didn't know what they were missing. They still don't. ICS is still a little weird to them, but they loved it. So do that. Do your job. And yeah, there I am taking the morning brief, right? Just like we all do, because it's not a cyber thingy. It's an incident.
So I thought in Colorado you always wore yellow shirts. Oh, there's one.
Yeah, there's a guy in yellow. Thanks for that. There's a guy in yellow. So this is, okay, so I told you, here we are managing our cyber, our highly technical incident, right? With butcher paper, daily rhythm, operational priorities. They're actually taped all over the walls. This guy found something, right? This is us making a mistake. This guy found something. Look what happened. Everybody ran over to see what he found. Oh, what'd you find, man? Who's watching their lane? Who's doing their job? About 9 seconds after this picture was taken, my ops chief said, "Hey, get back to your workstation." And then some other words that we don't use when I'm being recorded. Watch your lane, right? What does an emergency manager do? Keeps people in their lane. That guy was a deputy county sheriff, not a cybersecurity professional. But he looked at that and he said, "That ain't right. Get back in your lane." That's what we do. What else do we do? Well, we bring in people like this. These 3 people are certified in nothing. That wonderful human is doing financial accounting, right? Every incident, what do? We track costs. We figure out our burn rate. And that's what she's doing, so that we can figure out at the end of the day, who do we need to reimburse? How much do we need to reimburse? How much do we spend on this thing, right? Emergency management function, finance and accounting, right? Okay, that's what they're doing. That's the ops chief I was talking about, and he's doing ops chief stuff. He's waiting right there to get up and yell at all the cybersecurity professionals, tell them to get back in their lane, which, note, they are in this picture. They're where they belong, because he's glaring at them. You can't tell that. And she is also from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, and she's helping out with ops. It's just, they're not cybersecurity professionals. They're off an IMT, an emergency management team. They're doing incident management stuff. Because why? Why would they do that? Because it's not a cyber thingy, it's just an incident. And they know what to do. They don't have a CSSI PPP teach. They don't have one of those. But they're really good at what they do, and they needed to do it. So I talk about that a lot. And then you can see our network architecture. Who's seen your IT guy will come in and say, "I've got the network architecture, and it's right here on this server in this file. I can pull it up anytime I want to, except for when this ransomware hits. Then you can't pull it up because that server's dead." What? I have no map? Yeah, we had no map. We had no architecture because it was on the server. Won't do that twice.
And there's your perp right up there in the trench coat, see?
Yeah, that guy. He actually, that guy worked for one of our vendors. So, good dude, worked hard. But there's our network architecture because we had to go somewhere else, reinvent it, and draw it, and then we taped it to the wall.
How much were they asking for ransom to release it, or was there no?
Oh yeah, there was. I don't know. I didn't care. It sounds weird, right? Like I should probably know that. We made the decision, and there's a slide coming up talking about how we made the decision not to pay the ransom. And once the governor decided he wasn't going to pay the ransom, I think probably someone told me what it was, but once he decided he wasn't going to pay it, I put it out of my head because it didn't matter. It was kind of a lot, not anywhere nearly what they asked out of Texas. like Texas was maybe 8 or 10 times more than they asked us. So there's something weird going on in Texas. That's because they can never pay it, right? So I don't know what that's all about. I don't remember what the ransom was. It was kind of middle high, like we could have paid it. Certainly the state could have paid that. It actually probably would have cost us a little less than what we did choose to do. But once
Give in to the terrorists.
you don't, yeah, and there's reasons for that, important reasons.
Do you know of people that have, because I know there have been like hospitals that have paid ransoms, do they actually look at stuff?
I have some experience where I can speak specifically to that. The conventional wisdom is you don't get it all back, and when you get it back, it's not really good. That is our experience as well. So after this, subsequent to this, we did have a hospital in Larimer County attacked. They were insured. Cybersecurity insurance is a thing. It's a good thing and a bad thing, like every other insurance thing, right? We really did not want them to pay the ransom because that just makes you know, hey, I'm smart. If I can get money from you, I'm coming back. I mean, when I retire from this gig, I'm going to be a ransomware dude. Because if you pay me, I mean, this is like, we learned this in 5th grade on the playground. If you give your lunch money to the bully, what happens tomorrow? The bully comes back and takes your lunch money, and you stay hungry a long time. The hospital did pay. Their insurance company talked them into paying. They paid the deductible. The insurance company paid the rest, and the attacker, whom we do not know, and now we can't know, because part of the insurance policy says we won't pursue them. We won't. I mean, the FBI is like, okay, well, we're out. And they got back crap. The crypto key either was intentionally or it was just flawed, because really, are they going to spend time writing a good crypto key? I mean, they've already moved on to the next attack. This isn't their priority. The crypto key was either badly designed and it didn't work, or intentionally flawed. So they got crap. But I know, yeah, who knows, right? So I'm not a fan of paying the ransom. I appreciate the pain. I really appreciate the pain that goes with that choice. Had the governor chose to pay the ransom, I'd have had 5 weeks of just hanging out waiting for a fire. But I'm not a fan of paying the ransom. And yes, our experience is that it was very dissatisfying. I can't speak holistically about that. Okay, so what would we do differently? Part of the reason I try to go to as many places as I'm allowed to is because of that very first bullet. Man, we screwed that up. When Debbie's here, I'm like, Debbie, I'm sorry. I screwed that up. And I'm asking you not to screw this up. You notice on the timeline that I left my CISO hanging for about 6 days. Come on. If I'd have done that to a county sheriff, I'd have been fired on like day 4. There'd be some other guy talking to you. But I left my CISO hanging because I didn't approach it like an incident. I approached it like a cyber thingy. So now I tweet all the time, #NotCyberThingy. And I ask emergency managers, get in the game. This is your job. This is an incident. Don't do what I did. I can't believe Debbie even speaks with me. Well, we've known each other a long time, and we were pretty good friends, and I thought, once she figured out what I'd done to her, don't do that. Get in the game. Do your job right away. Define lanes and organize by tasks sooner. We had a lot of players that weren't used to working with each other. The CDOT Incident Command post was really good at handling winter storms. They do that all the time. They were pretty good at interacting with the fire community because they worked fires an awful lot. They could handle avalanches pretty well, and they worked with our avalanche incident folks. So they knew how to run that kind of ICP. They didn't have a clue what to do with the cyber incident response team. Conversely, the cyber incident response team, like I said, when I said, all right, we're using ICS, right? They're like, of course, there's industrial control systems all over the place. Awesome. when CDOT asked, which of the traffic control places were going to be affected so they could establish a TCP, they looked at him and said, why would you put a transmission control protocol out in the middle of the highway? Traffic control point? Yeah, okay. When we wrapped it up, we're like, we'll do an AAR and write an IP. An improvement plan. They're like, what do we need an IP? An internet protocol address for that? Where are you going to hang it? So you got to work through that. We should have done that sooner. We should have just had a meeting that says, these are the acronyms that mean something different to each of you. Right? So we got there. In fact, we did it on butcher board and taped it to the wall, but we got there too late. Do that sooner. Recognize that community. I talk about them like they're, I talk about normalizing cyber incident response, but they are a unique community. They do have their own language, and you do have to respect that, and you do have to get your head around it and be able to translate that to the other communities that are affected by the cyber incident. Cyber incidents are real. They have effects in the real world, the physical world, and emergency management is the right place to do that translation. Clarify lanes and roles with the vendors sooner. Woo, we had a real come to Jesus with the vendors one night, which resulted in about 6 calls to the governor. But that's okay, right? Because we're emergency managers. We're used to people calling the governor. When they came in, and they're not bad people, but you can imagine that they each sort of had their product that they were supposed to push and sell and do. They're a business. They work for somebody. And we had 4 different vendors helping us out. And they were all doing their own kind of thing, kind of helping us. Man, we put them in a room. I said, you guys got to get together. Either you're here to help us put CDOT back on, or you're not. And if you're not, you take your product and you get the hell out of here. And don't you come back. They needed that. They came back and they got together and they started working. Several people in really nice suits showed up. I'm like, ooh, who the hell are these guys? They were senior executives that came in to kind of, talk to me. You have to deal with that. But their team, their technical experts, after that meeting, they got their act together and they were invaluable. Couldn't have done it without them. Should have done that meeting sooner. Should have done that meeting. It would have been less painful. So I encourage people, hey, do it right away before it goes bad. Because we waited till almost bad. And you can do it right up, say, hey, these are the rules. This is how we're going to act. This is how we're going to interact with each other. And you vendors are going to work together because we need each other. You can say that up front. Should have done that sooner, so remember that. This happens a lot in a lot of incidents, and we made that mistake too. We didn't, the Department of Transportation had their incident command post running their operational rhythm. We had the cyber incident response team had been responding for some time, and they had an operational rhythm, and I plunked a UCG on top of that and set up my operational rhythm. And wondered why they weren't coming to my meetings. Because they're in their meetings. So that's probably, I've learned that lesson before. I just made the same mistake again. We're pretty good at that. So I always put it up there to remind people, get your operational rhythms synchronized so that people can be where they need to be. Then stop chasing the bad guy sooner. Man, that was a lot of fun. Who doesn't want to get the bad guy? Man, we had him pinned down to a physical address in St. Petersburg, not Florida. We were wrong, but what the hell? Not our job. Not our job, right? Back to the priorities. Get CDOT back on its feet. Secure the Colorado State network. Defend, not chase. The FBI came in, set up shop. Those guys are weird. Anybody here from the FBI? That's their job. That's their job. Give them all the information and stop chasing the bad guys and defend. Secure the perimeter and recover. Get your organization back online, back doing their job. Man, we chased that guy all over the place. Finally, I'm like, stop it. Okay, so we find him. What are we going to do then? We're a bunch of state emergency managers, man. It's not like I'm going to go to St. Petersburg and raid some house. Be cool. It's not my job. So the emergency manager is the guy. The emergency manager is the entity that says, stop that. That's not your lane. Defend. Stop chasing the bad guy. Man, those guys, those malware dudes, they're like anybody, right? They love what they do, and they chased every signature all over the map. We're like, stop it. Give that signature to the FBI and walk away. It's hard to do because we all want the bad guy, right? We were pretty pissed at him, to be honest with you, because he was definitely wrecking some weekends. So those are things we'd do differently. Here's some things we'd do again. I showed you where the PIO landed. We got our act together. Remember the bad press versus, say, Atlanta or Baltimore? We got our act together on the public messaging. We established a JIC, which, by the way, there's no acronym in the cybersecurity world for JIC, so they were like, it means nothing. It doesn't even mean the wrong thing. It means nothing at all. With the governor's office, the Office of Information Technology, the Transportation Office, and our State Emergency Operations Center, PIO, was the lead of that JIC, and that is our standard practice. We do it for fires, we do it for floods, we do it for blizzards, and we did it for this, and it was the right thing to do. Because what? It's not a cyber thingy, it's an incident. So act like it. EMAC. EMAC is a great tool, and it works for this also. I suspect North Dakota, like Colorado, has a limited cyber response capability. Most states do. But what do we do? What do emergency managers do when we have a limited capability? We ask for help through this well-established process that we all know how to use. Right? So there's nothing wrong with that. Mutual aid. Mutual aid doesn't mean much to a cybersecurity professional, but it means a lot to us. And so our procedures, our processes that we use for everything else can be very useful here. We EMAC'd in California, sent us a great team. Just like anything else, you have the subject matter expert write the EMAC request so you get what you really want. And we did that. We talked about, all right, so before we got involved as the Office of Emergency Manager, how do you feed a room full of hungry people when they're sick of pizza? Typically, Debbie tells this story because she lived it. They had been working, and they don't have a way to sustain themselves logistically, right? The cyber incident response team is not self-sufficient. So they were buying pizza, and then they were buying more pizza, and then they were buying pizza. The CISO, the state CISO, who probably should be doing something else, and the Chief Information Technology Officer, who probably should be doing something else, were out running around trying to buy pizza until they got sick of pizza, and then they're out trying to run around and buy chicken. And it was a disaster. Why? I don't want a CISO who's good at ordering pizza. I want a CISO who's really good at information security, right? They didn't have any idea. Why? Because they don't know how many people they have on. Because they don't have a practice of accounting for people, so they didn't know how much food to order. When we got there was food all over the place rotting. Why? Because they work through the weekend. Guess when the custodial service doesn't come? Not their job. They didn't know how many people were there, but not their job, right? It's our job. It's what we do. We're really good at it. We rolled in, my logistics chief, oh my God, he was like, first he seized up. He's like, what the hell is happening here? I'm like, dude, get a handle on it. You can do this. A couple pats on the back. You'll be all right, man. I told you about the Red Bull. He's like, all that Red Bull's going straight out of here. They got the trash out. They got the Red Bull out. They brought in water. Who knew cybersecurity professionals needed water? And he started ordering he went around and we used a salamander system. I'm sure all of you have a system for, there you go, right? We do this, right? We can't help ourselves. It's in our nature. I'm just at a conference. I'm at a conference and you guys gave me one of these. I'm accounted for. Somebody knows I'm here. It says so. It's got my name on it. They don't do that. We do. It's normal for us. Wow, weird. As soon as he did that, he knew how many people were there. And he ordered food for, guess what? The number of people that were there. And he contracted for janitorial services. They hadn't cleaned the bathroom. The ladies' bathroom was really nice. The men's bathroom.
You can only drink so much Red Bull.
So that really told us two things. One, we need to recruit more women into cybersecurity, which I'm a huge fan of. And two, we need to clean the doggone bathrooms. It's normal stuff because it's an incident, right? Who's ever run an incident and didn't get porta-johns? Did it work out well for you? We run an incident, we're like, well, there's going to be 355 firefighters here, so we need one two. We need two. We need two porta-johns.
One for handicap.
That's right. And then, so this is what I tell the emergency management community. Normalize your cyber response. Normalize your cyber response. Do what you always do. Because they're human. They're going to use the bathroom. They're human. They're going to eat. Do what you do. And then we should have established priorities earlier. That's really related to we got the UCG stood up too late. And so that the second order effect was we were working on multiple sets of priorities for too long. We needed to do that sooner. And then and let me tell you what, you want to freak out a cybersecurity professional? Write something on a piece of butcher paper and put it on the wall. They're like, whoa. Do you want me to podcast that? I'm like, no, I don't, because you're not on the internet. So, but, and once they got used to it, they were like, hey man, check that out, let's go read those. Because they are normal. They can read something that's not in digits. Debbie loves it when I tell that story. All right. Key takeaways. Whatever scale you're at, you should do this. You may have a managed service provider. You may, if you're many of our counties do managed service providers, then they share them across counties because they can't afford to have their own, and that's fair. It's not a complaint. That's a good way. But work with your managed service provider or your own team, whatever it is, and define your response. One of the things that we're starting to learn from Texas is their managed service providers were IT people and not cybersecurity people. Important, not the same thing. They're not. That is two different disciplines within that broader function. If you have a managed service provider, ask them, hey, let's go over your cyber incident response plan and talk about your cyber incident response team. No matter what scale you're at, somebody's doing that for you. Find out who they are and talk to them about this stuff. And then rehearse it. And what emergency managers know this, right? Because every function we deal with, we say, oh yeah, you should rehearse that plan. Oh yeah, I'll do that, maybe next month when I have more money. Whoever your provider is, internal, external, contracted, rehearse it. We, in Colorado, were extremely fortunate. We had been doing semi-annual cybersecurity response exercises for about 4 years. Debbie and I became friends. We knew each other from those exercises. And I still left her hanging for 6 days. So do your exercise. That saved our bacon, those relationships we had established, especially with our National Guard. Our state cyber incident response team, when the National Guard cyber response team walked in, they were like, hey, Bill. Hey, Isaac. They knew each other. What's an emergency management phrase? Don't exchange business cards at the incident. Anybody heard that? Emergency managers say that all the time. Why is that important in cyber? Because it's not a cyber thing. It's an incident. Don't exchange business cards with your cyber incident response team at the incident. It doesn't matter. It's the same as everything else. Seriously address cyber in your coop. Look at your coops. This is not an IT problem. It's a business function problem. It's a government problem. It's a business problem. It is your entire organization's problem. We pawn that off on IT. And IT, when you say what's at risk, they see it very differently perhaps than you do. So hash that out. It would have helped us a lot if on day one, the executive director of the Department of Transportation could have gone to the CISO and said, I don't know how you're going to do that, but these are the 5 things that are most important to me. These are my crown jewels. I don't even know where they are. You know, in the IT architecture, I don't even know which server they're on. I don't know which domain controller matters. I don't even know what those things are. These 5 things are more important to me than anything else. Please save that. Debbie would have been like, well, I'll find that. We didn't get to that point because they hadn't contemplated that in their coop. So work with your people who do coop. You do coops, right? You have to. You have to do a coop. So take this next step. Talk about where are your crown jewels and how get with your cybersecurity professionals and your IT people and say, where does that crown jewel reside in the IT architecture? Then wherever that is what I got to save first and not this. That helps. We didn't do that. We did that on the fly. All right. Their coop, this guy's a funny guy. And he was not wrong. Better suited for a meteor hit than a cyber attack. Had their building been completely wiped out by a meteor, they'd have been like, cool, we know what to do. They nearly, a CDOT employee who I don't know who it is, but this person, he or she is a rock star because he or she had read the COOP plan and knew exactly what to do. She or he had taken her laptop home, and she was on her way to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and she was going to plug in and get to work because that's what the COOP said. Holy crap. What if she had done that? That ransomware would have been off to the races in our Public Health and Environment Department. It was the worst possible thing she could have done, and she would have been exactly right. She would have followed the COOP. Apparently, the other 2,800 employees didn't read the COOP. Got away with one there. But this one employee, and that's why I told you this federal team came in and started going to all the other departments, because had a member of CDOT successfully executed the COOP, we'd have been screwed. So address that kind of stuff in your COOP plans. There are some things you should do differently to protect against cyber. Do responses that include emergency management, business response in your cyber exercise. Debbie and I have done a bunch of exercises. We really never engaged the holistic emergency management apparatus, and we never did it with a business function. We never brought in a business function and said, hey, if this were to happen to you, let's exercise the things that are most important to you, which is not save the network. Because weirdly, they don't care about the network. So bring in, as you have opportunity, some business partners so that you can start getting used to their different priorities than your response. Yes, sir?
Define business partners?
You can define it in a lot of ways. We started with what we felt we could control the most, and that was our other state agencies. The private sector, because of the way statutes work, a lot of times they'll be good partners and they'll want to do it. In Colorado, our statutes make it difficult to respond to a private industry, but at least you still get the sense. So we have focused on other state partners and their business processes. Health and Human Services, they have a lot of business processes, so we're working with them.
You're talking about the programs themselves. In other words, you're talking about our plans to address social services, be sure they're backed up to keep more.
Yeah, and that you know what their most important things are. what are their crown jewels? And that'll, frankly, it'll help them write their COOP better. A lot of business, whether it's the business of running the state or the county, they don't identify their crown jewels very well. And so when you have a cyber incident that puts those at risk, they don't really know what's at risk. And we found that when we bring them in and we run them through the exercise and they say, well, they start to identify the things that matter most to them. And when you can share that with your cybersecurity professionals, then they start to identify the pieces of the architecture that have to be preserved or rebuilt first. Otherwise, you have this disconnect there. The cybersecurity response team may be working down, rebuilding the wrong things because you don't know what's important to the business aspect of your health and human services, your motor vehicle, whoever it is.
Well, our big problem is proprietary programs, that,
Yeah.
like, this is the only program that reads the water meter for this town.
Yeah.
So I can replace the computers, I can bring them
Yeah.
back up on Windows 10, but they still can't function at the city because they cannot operate.
And that's the important stuff to identify. Because there's your gap, right? And what we're finding is in a lot of Colorado counties is they don't know that institutionally. They know that in pieces and parts. The water guy knows, but he's never told the IT guy, hey, I got this one thing, and no matter what, because your IT people, they'll go build a relationship with the owner of that software. And they'll say, okay, look, you're not going to let us look at it, but at least I need to know who to call when I have an incident so I can get the owner of that proprietary software on the line and say, look, you got to help me here. If your IT people don't know that's proprietary and important, then they don't put the right people in their Rolodex. So this is a big wake up, and this saved our bacon, and it wasn't because emergency management thought about it. Mitigate. You mitigate for other risks, right? So mitigate for this risk, and the secure backup, and it's a tough sell, like a lot of mitigation, right? It's a tough sell to whoever your purse string holders are, because it's going to cost money. But all mitigation programs cost money, right? But it's worth it. There's a return on investment. This was the single most important factor for our decision not to pay the ransom. Our OIT was able to establish a point where all information was safe and current and protected. It was in a secure backup that we proofed, we validated had not been infected, and we went to the executive director of CDOT and the governor, and we said, February 19th, everything is safe. Okay, yeah, it's March 1st or 2nd when we're saying this, but there's a point where we could say, when we rebuild, we will restart you here. And the CDOT ED said, I can live with that. And the governor said, then we will not pay the ransom, and we will rebuild. We mitigate for, it's one of our 5 emergency management mission areas, right? So in normalizing cyber and normalizing cybersecurity, work with your whomever your cybersecurity professionals are, whether it's contracted or not, talk about mitigation. The same way we go, I do this, I imagine many of you do this, you go to your county commissioner, right? Talk about mitigation. It's going to cost you some money, commissioner. There's a return on investment. I don't know yet, but we're probably going to find out in a year or so how many counties in Texas were prepared, how many had mitigated. There's other mitigation. I put secure backup. That's a good one. It gets kind of technical when you start talking about network segmentation, but that's a mitigation step. When you talk about two-factor authentication, that's a mitigation step. So I don't want to get it. We can if you want to, but it gets kind of techno-weird. But mitigate. And then I've said this all along, so I won't reiterate, but don't freak out. You know how to do this. The truth is you're not doing anything you don't do every day. You're just doing it with a cybersecurity incident response team instead of a fire task force or a fire strike team or a SWAT team. You know, I tell my, they love it too. I tell the cyber incident response team, yeah, you're like my internet SWAT. And they're like, yeah, SWAT-like. And the SWAT guys are like, really? I'm like, yeah, but you're just SWAT. You don't have any real skills. You run around breaking doors. Come on. I'm like, you're my internet SWAT. Act like it. But when I think of them that way, it helps me, right? I tell my EOC manager, I'm like, hey, man, it's no different than dealing with a SWAT or a fire task force or anything else. You know how to do, he has no technical skills. His deputy has to log him into web EOC. These guys got no skills. I'm like, but it's like every other incident. Act like it. And your PIO matters. That's all emergency managers know that. It applies in this too. PIOs matter. We being they, the JIC, ran a great public information program. We informed the public. We kept the media in the loop, treated them just like any other incident. They stayed on our side. They were very kind to us, but we engaged them appropriately. All PIOs know how important they are to an incident. Just remind them that it's an incident and not a cyber thingy, and they'll be fine. My PIO was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like, but you know how to run a JIC, and the Office of Information Technology is putting their PIO in a JIC, so you know what to do. You'll be fine. And she was. Okay. That's what I got.